The explosion threw Corporal Kira Navarro and her war dog, Atlas, into the rubble. Dust clouded everything. Gunfire erupted from 3 directions. Atlas pressed against her side, trained and silent despite the chaos. 20 meters away, her spotter lay motionless. The enemy was closing in fast. She had maybe 15 seconds before they reached her position. What they did not know, what nobody on this battlefield seemed to understand, was that Kira Navarro was not just a dog handler caught in the wrong place. She was a Marine Corps sniper with 47 confirmed kills. The morning had started like any other patrol. Atlas had alerted to the IED 300 meters before they reached it, his ears pricking forward in that specific way that meant danger ahead. Kira had trusted him completely. She always did. The Belgian Malinois had saved her life 11 times in the past 8 months. Today would make 12, though neither of them knew it yet. Her spotter, Lance Corporal Devin Shun, had been checking the sight lines when the ambush erupted. The first rounds caught him before he could drop. Kira watched him fall, and something cold settled in her chest. Not panic, not fear. The same ice-water calm that had earned her the top graduation spot at Scout Sniper School. She had pulled Atlas behind the crumbled wall and assessed the situation in 3 seconds flat. Enemy fighters were moving through the destroyed buildings with tactical precision. At least 15 of them, maybe 20. They were trying to flank her position from multiple angles, which meant they knew exactly where she was. Someone had been watching. Someone had planned this. Atlas growled low in his throat. Kira placed one hand on his vest, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing. The dog weighed 65 pounds of pure muscle and had been trained to detect explosives, track insurgents, and attack on command. But right now, his most important job was staying quiet and staying alive. She could hear boots crunching through debris, voices calling to each other in Arabic. They were close. Too close for her to reach her rifle, which had been thrown 15 feet away when the blast hit. Her sidearm had 2 magazines, 42 rounds total. Not nearly enough. The decision made itself. Kira raised her hands slowly as the first fighter rounded the corner. His AK-47 pointed directly at her chest. She kept her eyes down, made herself smaller, let Atlas lean against her leg. The fighter shouted something, and 2 more appeared. They were young, maybe early 20s, with the hard eyes of men who had seen too much death. One of them spotted Atlas and raised his weapon. Kira moved without thinking, placing herself between the rifle and her dog. She spoke quickly in the Arabic she had learned during pre-deployment training. "I'm a dog handler. Just a dog handler. He is trained for bombs. He can help you. Do not shoot him." The fighter hesitated. That hesitation saved both their lives. A voice barked orders from somewhere behind the rubble, and the fighters lowered their weapons slightly. A man emerged from the smoke and dust, older than the others, wearing a tactical vest that had seen serious use. His eyes were sharp and calculating as they moved from Kira to Atlas to the scattered gear around them. He spoke in English, his accent thick but clear. "You are far from your unit, Marine." Kira kept her voice steady. "We were on patrol. The IED separated us from the others." His gaze moved to Devin's body. "Your friend will not be filing a report." The words hit like a physical blow, but Kira kept her face neutral. She had learned in sniper school that emotion was a liability in the field. Show nothing. Give them nothing. She focused on Atlas instead, running her fingers through his fur in the calming pattern she had used since he was assigned to her 14 months ago. Before we continue, drop a comment and let us know what state you're watching from. Maybe you have witnessed the incredible bond between military working dogs and their handlers. The commander gestured to his men, and they moved forward, pulling Kira to her feet. They zip-tied her hands in front of her, tight enough to bite, but not quite tight enough to cut off circulation. One of them grabbed Atlas by his tactical vest, and the dog snapped at him, teeth flashing. Kira gave the command in German. "Atlas, Platz." The dog dropped immediately, though every muscle in his body remained coiled tight. The commander studied this interaction with interest. "You have control of the animal." Kira met his eyes for the first time. "He trusts me. I am his handler. Then you will handle him now. We are moving. If he attacks my men, I will shoot him myself. If you try to run, I will shoot him first and then you. Do you understand? She understood perfectly. They needed her alive for some reason, which meant she had value. And they were smart enough to know that threatening Atlas was the fastest way to ensure her cooperation. She nodded once. They moved through the ruins of what had once been a residential neighborhood. Kira memorized every turn, every landmark, every potential position of cover. Old habits from sniper training. Always know your environment. Always have an exit strategy. Always count your rounds and your options. Atlas walked beside her, his body tense but disciplined. He was waiting for her command, ready to attack or defend the moment she gave the word. But Kira kept him calm, with small touches and quiet German words. Not yet. Not here. Not with 15 rifles pointed at them. The commander walked beside her, his rifle held casually but ready. He asked questions as they moved. How long have you worked with the dog? What is your unit? Where are they positioned? Kira answered the safe questions and deflected the dangerous ones. She told him about Atlas, about his training, about how good he was at finding hidden explosives. She did not tell him about the M40A5 sniper rifle she had qualified expert with. She did not mention the 47 confirmed kills. She especially did not mention that she had been trained to operate independently for up to 72 hours behind enemy lines. They reached a compound that had somehow survived the worst of the fighting. Concrete walls, metal gate, guard positions on the roof. The commander gestured for her to enter, and Kira walked through with Atlas at her side, her mind already mapping the exits and calculating the distances. The room they put her in was small and windowless, lit by a single bulb hanging from exposed wiring. Atlas settled beside her on the concrete floor, his warmth a familiar comfort in an unfamiliar place. Kira sat with her back against the wall and ran through the tactical assessment that had become second nature after 3 years in the Corps. For guards outside, 2 on the roof that she had counted during entry. The compound had 3 buildings arranged in a shape around a central courtyard. She was in the eastern building, ground floor, approximately 12 feet from the nearest exit. The zip ties on her wrists were standard issue, which meant she could break them if she got the right leverage and was willing to deal with the noise. But noise would bring the guards, and the guards would shoot Atlas first. She leaned her head back against the wall and closed her eyes. Devin's face appeared immediately behind her eyelids. 22 years old, from Sacramento, engaged to a woman named Jennifer who sent him care packages with those expensive cookies he loved. He had been her spotter for 6 months and had saved her life twice by catching movement she had missed through her scope. Now he was lying in the street with half his chest gone, and Kira was the only one who knew he was there. His family would get a notification, probably already had, but they would not know the details, would not know that he died doing his job perfectly, that the ambush was not his fault, that he never saw it coming. Atlas nudged her hand with his nose. The dog had an uncanny ability to sense when her thoughts went dark. Kira scratched behind his ears and felt some of the tension ease from her shoulders. She had been partnered with Atlas since completing the military working dog handler course at Lackland Air Force Base. The instructors had told her that Malinois bonded intensely with one handler, and Atlas had chosen her within the first week. What they had not told her was how much she would come to depend on that bond. The door opened and the commander entered, followed by a younger man carrying a metal folding chair. The commander sat down and studied her with the same calculating expression he had worn earlier. Up close, Kira could see the scars on his hands, the wear on his equipment, the confidence of someone who had survived long enough to learn from his mistakes. He spoke without preamble. Your identification says you are a military working dog handler. Corporal Navarro, 24 years old. From Texas. Kira said nothing. Name, rank, and service number. That was all she was required to give. The commander leaned back in the chair. I am told you are a woman, which is unusual for American combat roles. Even more unusual to be forward deployed with only one other Marine. Why would they send a dog handler so far from the main unit? Because Atlas is good at his job, Kira replied. We were sweeping for IEDs ahead of a supply convoy. The commander nodded slowly. A reasonable explanation. except that I have been fighting Americans for 7 years, and I have never seen a dog handler carry a spotter scope. Kira felt her pulse quicken, but kept her expression neutral. My partner was the scout. I assisted. Was he also a dog handler? He was a rifleman assigned to provide security. The commander smiled without warmth. You're a good liar, Corporal Navarro, but not good enough. We found your gear. The rangefinder, the ballistic calculator, the ghillie suit material in your pack. These are not tools for a dog handler. Kira met his eyes and said nothing. The silence stretched between them like a wire pulled taut. Atlas shifted beside her, his muscles coiled tight beneath his fur. She could feel him waiting for her signal, ready to attack despite the odds. The commander stood and walked to the door. You will tell me what I want to know eventually. Everyone does. But I'm a patient man. We will start with simple questions and see where that leads us. He left without another word. The door closed, and Kira heard the lock engage. She waited 30 seconds, then carefully examined the room. No cameras that she could see. No obvious listening devices. Just concrete walls, a metal door, and a single light bulb. She positioned herself in the corner where she could watch the door and began working on a plan. The zip ties were the first problem. She could break them, but it would take time, and the guard would hear. Better to wait until there was a distraction. An explosion nearby. A shift change. Something that would cover the sound. The second problem was Atlas. She could not leave without him, and he would slow her down. But abandoning him was not an option. Would never be an option. The third problem was the most critical. Her unit did not know where she was. The patrol route had been classified, and the ambush had happened in a disputed zone where rescue operations were complicated by political considerations. They might assume she was dead, might write her off as a combat loss, and move on. That thought should have terrified her, but instead it crystallized into cold determination. If no one was coming to save her, she would have to save herself. Atlas laid his head on her leg, and Kira stroked his fur in the darkness. She thought about Scout Sniper School, about the instructors who had told her she did not belong, that women did not have the physical strength or mental fortitude for the role. She had proved them wrong by outscoring every male candidate in her class, had earned her place through precision and discipline and the kind of stubbornness that refused to accept failure. Her platoon sergeant had pulled her aside after graduation. You're going to face people who think you only passed because the Corps needed diversity numbers. Prove them wrong every single day. Make every shot count. Be better than good. Be undeniable. Kira had carried those words through every mission, every patrol, every moment when the weight of the rifle felt heavier than it should. She had made herself undeniable through 47 confirmed kills, through 0 missed shots under pressure, through the kind of consistency that turns skeptics into believers. And now she was zip-tied in a room with a war dog and no weapon, and none of that seemed to matter. Except it did matter, because the training did not stop when the rifle was gone. The mindset remained. The discipline held. She was still a Marine, still a sniper, still someone who had been taught to survive impossible situations through patience and planning and the willingness to take the shot when it counted. The door opened again several hours later. A different guard brought water in a plastic bottle and a piece of flatbread. He set them on the floor just inside the door and backed out quickly, his rifle trained on Atlas the entire time. The dog did not move, did not growl, just watched with dark eyes that promised violence if given the command. Kira drank half the water and gave the rest to Atlas in her cupped hands. She tore the bread into pieces and fed it to him slowly, making it last. She had no idea when they would get food again. Night fell and the temperature dropped. Kira pulled Atlas closer and felt his body heat seep in her side. Outside, she could hear voices, movement, the distant sound of gunfire from somewhere in the city. The war continued whether she was part of it or not. She thought about her unit, thought about Staff Sergeant Marcus Okafor, who had recommended her for sniper training, about Corporal Lisa Reyes, who had helped her prepare for the physical requirements, about all the Marines who had supported her even when others doubted. They would not stop looking for her. She knew that with absolute certainty. But she also knew the reality of combat operations. Resources were limited. Time was critical. Every hour she spent in this room was an hour closer to being written off as unrecoverable, which meant she had to move soon, had to find a way out before patience turned into acceptance of capture. Atlas shifted against her, and Kira made a silent promise to them both. They would get out of this, together, whatever it took. The interrogation began at dawn. 2 guards dragged Kira from the room and left Atlas behind. She heard him barking as they pulled her down the hallway, heard the fury in his voice that meant he was 2 seconds from breaking through that door. She called back to him in German. Bleib, stay. Atlas, bleib. The barking stopped, but she could still hear him whining. That sound cut deeper than anything the commander could do to her. They brought her to a larger room with a table and 2 chairs. The commander sat on one side, relaxed and confident. Kira sat on the other, her hands still zip-tied in front of her. A guard stood by the door with his rifle ready. The commander pushed a folder across the table. Inside were photographs. Kira recognized them immediately. Surveillance photos taken from distance. Her and Devin moving through sectors. Her carrying the rifle case. Her in position on a rooftop 3 weeks ago. You have been active in this region for 4 months, the commander said. My men have reported a sniper working these neighborhoods. Very precise, very professional. 43 confirmed kills by our count. Kira kept her face blank. She had 47 confirmed kills, but she was not about to correct his math. The commander tapped one of the photos. This is you. Yesterday, 500 meters from where we captured you. You were in overwatch position while a convoy passed through the market district. That was Devin, Kira lied smoothly. I was providing security with Atlas. The commander smiled. Your loyalty to your dead friend is admirable, but we both know the truth. The question now is what I do with that truth. He stood and walked around the table, stopping behind her chair. Kira tracked his movement with her peripheral vision, every muscle ready despite the restraints. He leaned down close enough that she could smell tobacco on his breath. Female snipers are rare, he said quietly. Valuable. The kind of prisoner that could be traded for significant concessions. Or the kind of propaganda victory that could inspire our fighters for months. Imagine the headlines. American woman warrior captured and broken. Forced to confess her crimes on camera. Kira turned her head slightly to meet his eyes. You will be disappointed then. I have nothing to confess. Everyone confesses eventually, Corporal Navarro. The only variable is how much suffering comes first. He returned to his chair and gestured to the guard. The man left and returned moments later, dragging Atlas by his vest. The dog was fighting every step, snarling and snapping, but the guard had a catch-pole around his neck that kept him a distance. Kira lurched forward in her chair, but another guard appeared from nowhere and shoved her back down. The commander watched this with interest. You care about the animal. His name is Atlas, Kira said through clenched teeth. And yes. Good. Then we understand each other. You will answer my questions truthfully, or I will have my men take the dog outside and shoot him. It is very simple. Kira looked at Atlas, at his dark eyes fixed on her, at the way he was still trying to reach her despite the pole choking him. She thought about the 12 times he had saved her life. Thought about the nights he had kept watch while she slept on patrol. Thought about how he trusted her completely and absolutely. Ask your questions, she said. The commander leaned forward. Where is your unit positioned? Kira gave him the location of a base 60 miles away that had been decommissioned 2 months ago. He wrote it down without comment. How many snipers operate in this region? 3, Kira lied. All male. I work support. The commander studied her face. What weapons do you carry? M4 carbine. Standard issue for my role. Kira kept her voice steady even though her hands were shaking beneath the table. The interrogation continued for 2 hours. The commander asked about patrol routes, unit strength, radio frequencies, command structure. Kira gave him a mixture of outdated information and complete fabrications. She had been trained for this at SEER school. Survival, evasion, resistance, escape. The instructors had taught her that the goal was not to remain silent under torture. That was impossible for most people. The goal was to resist long enough to protect current operations and give false information convincing enough to waste enemy resources. Finally, the commander stood. "You are lying to me, Corporal Navarro, but you are skilled at it. That skill tells me you have been trained for interrogation resistance, which tells me you are exactly what I suspected." He gestured, and the guard dragged Atlas from the room. Kira watched him go, every instinct screaming at her to fight, to break free, to get to her dog. But she forced herself to remain still, forced herself to think tactically. Fighting now would get them both killed. The commander paused at the door. "I will give you time to reconsider your answers. When we speak again, I expect the truth. For the dog's sake, if not your own." They returned her to the small room, but Atlas was not there. Kira paced the concrete floor, her mind racing through scenarios. They were using Atlas as leverage, which meant they would not kill him immediately. He had value as long as she cooperated. But cooperation meant betraying her unit, meant giving up positions and patrol routes that would get Marines killed. She thought about Staff Sergeant Okafor, about the conversation they had before her first deployment. You will face impossible choices in combat. Choices where every option costs something. The key is knowing which costs you can live with and which ones you cannot. Kira could live with capture, could live with interrogation, could even live with whatever physical suffering they decided to inflict. But she could not live with getting her fellow Marines killed, could not live with betraying the trust they had placed in her, which left her with exactly one option: escape. Soon, before the interrogations escalated and before they decided Atlas had outlived his usefulness. She examined the room again with fresh urgency. The door was solid metal with the lock on the outside. The walls were concrete, but the ceiling was different. Exposed wooden beams supporting corrugated metal sheeting. Old construction, weakened by years of weather and conflict. Kira dragged the chair to the corner and stood on it. The metal sheeting was loose in places where the fasteners had rusted through. She worked one edge with her fingers, careful to stay quiet. It moved. Not much, but enough. A plan formed in her mind. Wait for nightfall. Work the metal sheeting loose. Climb into the ceiling space. Find Atlas. Find weapons. Find a way out. It was risky. Probably stupid. Definitely dangerous. But staying here was a guarantee of either breaking under torture or watching Atlas die. Those odds were unacceptable. The door opened, and a guard entered with food. Rice and some kind of meat in a metal bowl. He sat on the floor and backed out quickly. Kira ignored the food and returned to examining the ceiling. She had maybe 6 hours until dark. 6 hours to prepare. She thought about Devon again, about how he used to say that every mission came down to timing and commitment. Get the timing right and commit fully. No hosetaschen, no sekongisin. Kira stepped down from the chair and ate the food mechanically, forcing herself to consume the calories she would need for what came next. Then she returned to the ceiling and began working the metal sheeting systematically, centimeter by centimeter. Outside, she could hear the compound coming alive with evening activity. Voices calling, equipment being moved. Somewhere in the distance, the steady thump of helicopter rotors. American helicopters by the sound of them. Her people, so close and yet impossibly far away. Alice was somewhere in this compound, alive, waiting for her, trusting that she would come for him the same way he had always come for her. She would not let him down, whatever it took, however long it took. They were getting out of here together. Darkness fell like a curtain, and Kira moved into position. She had spent the last 4 hours working the corrugated metal loose enough to squeeze through. Her fingers were raw and bleeding, but the opening was ready. She stood on the chair and listened carefully to the sounds outside her door. 2 guards. She could hear them talking in low voices about 20 feet away. They changed shifts every 4 hours according to the pattern she had observed. The next change would happen around midnight. That gave her a 3-hour window to find Atlas and get out. She wedged her bound hands into the gap and pulled herself up into the ceiling space. The corrugated metal groaned quietly under her weight, but held. Kira lay flat across the wooden beams, breathing slowly to control her racing heart. The space between the ceiling and the roof was maybe 2 feet high. cramped and dark, and filled with dust that made her want to cough. She army crawled forward, distributing her weight carefully across the beams. The compound had 3 buildings arranged in a shape. She was in the eastern building. She had seen guards take Atlas toward the western building that afternoon. That meant crossing the central courtyard somehow, without being spotted. The ceiling space extended the length of the building. Kira moved slowly, pausing every few feet to listen. Below her, she could hear voices, movement, the ordinary sounds of men settling in for the night. She counted at least 8 distinct voices. Maybe more. The numbers were not encouraging, but she had faced worse odds. 20 minutes of crawling brought her to the far end of the building. Through gaps in the metal roofing, she could see the courtyard below. 2 guards standing near a vehicle. One smoking a cigarette, the other checking his rifle. No clear path across. Kira lay still and assessed her options. She could wait for the guards to move, but that might take hours she did not have. She could try to go around through the buildings, but that meant more exposure. Or she could create a distraction. Her eyes fell on a section of loose metal roofing near the northern building. If she could reach it and make enough noise, the guards might investigate. That would give her maybe 60 seconds to cross the courtyard and get into the western building. She began moving toward the northern building, her progress agonizingly slow. The zip ties on her wrists made everything harder. She needed to break them, but the technique required a sharp, downward motion that would make noise. Not yet. Not until she had no other choice. A sound stopped her cold. Barking. Atlas. His voice was coming from the western building, maybe 50 meters away. He barked twice more, then fell silent. Kira felt relief flood through her. He was alive, alert, probably sensed her nearby. She reached the edge of the eastern building and studied the gap between structures. 6 feet of open air. The fall to the courtyard was maybe 15 feet. Survivable, but loud. She would have to jump across to the northern building's roof. Kira backed up 3 feet on the beam, took 2 deep breaths, and launched herself forward. She flew across the gap and landed hard on the northern building's metal roof. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet night. She flattened herself immediately and waited. Shouting erupted from the courtyard. Footsteps running. She heard the guards below, calling to each other, their voices sharp with alarm. Flashlight beams swept across the rooftops. Kira pressed herself against the metal and did not move. One of the flashlight beams passed directly over her. She held her breath. The guard called something to his companion, and the beam moved on. They were searching, but they did not expect anyone on the roof. Their training had made them predictable. The guards converged on the eastern building, probably checking her room. That gave Kira the opening she needed. She scrambled across the northern building's roof and reached the western side. Below her, a narrow alley separated the buildings. She lowered herself over the edge and dropped. The landing sent jolts of pain through her ankles, but she rolled with it and came up in a crouch. The alley was dark and empty. She pressed against the wall and listened. Atlas barked again, closer now. Ground floor, maybe 3 rooms away. Kira moved along the wall until she found a door. Locked. She tested the next one. Also locked. The 3rd door moved when she pushed it. She slipped inside and found herself in a storage room filled with crates and equipment. Moonlight filtered through a high window, providing just enough illumination to navigate. She searched quickly and found what she needed. A piece of metal shelving with a sharp edge. She positioned the zip tie against it and jerked her hands downward hard. The plastic snapped, and her hands were free. She flexed her fingers, feeling blood flow return. Atlas barked again. 2 rooms over. Kira moved toward the sound, her entire body coiled tight with anticipation. She tried the door handle. Locked. But this lock was older, simpler. She pulled a thin piece of metal from her pocket that she had taken from the ceiling space and worked it into the mechanism. The lock clicked open. Kira eased the door open, and Atlas launched himself at her. 75 pounds of pure joy and relief. She caught him and buried her face in his fur, feeling his heart hammering against her chest. He licked her face and whined softly, his tail moving so fast it was almost invisible. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, Atlas. I got you. We are leaving." She checked him quickly for injuries. No blood. No limping. They had kept him locked up, but otherwise unharmed. Small mercies. A guard appeared in the doorway. He froze when he saw her, his rifle half raised. Kira reacted on instinct. She grabbed the rifle barrel and yanked hard, pulling him off balance. Atlas was on him instantly, 65 pounds of trained aggression hitting him like a missile. The guard went down hard with Atlas's jaws locked on his forearm. Kira stripped the rifle from his hands and slammed the stock into his temple. He went limp. She grabbed his radio and his sidearm, then gave Atlas the release command. The dog backed off immediately, his eyes fixed on her, waiting for direction. She keyed the radio and listened. Chatter in Arabic. Someone had discovered her empty room. They were organizing a search. She had maybe 2 minutes before the compound turned into a hornet's nest. The guard had night vision goggles on his vest. Kira took them and scanned the compound through the window. 8 contacts visible, were probably inside the buildings. The main gate was on the southern side, manned by at least 2 guards. The walls were 10 feet high, with concertina wire on top. Going through the gate was suicide. Going over the walls meant exposing herself to fire from multiple angles. She needed a third option. Her eyes fell on the vehicle in the courtyard. A technical truck with a mounted machine gun. If she could reach it and get it started, she could ram through the gate. Atlas could ride in the cab with her. The machine gun would provide covering fire. It was insane. Probably would get them both killed. But staying here guaranteed death or worse. Kira stripped the tactical vest from the unconscious guard and put it on. Too big, but it would do. She loaded the rifle and checked the sidearm. 17 rounds in the Glock. Full magazine in the AK-47. Not enough firepower for a sustained fight, but enough to reach the vehicle. She looked at Atlas. The dog was watching her with complete trust, ready to follow her into whatever hell came next. She had asked herself 1,000 times during training if she was strong enough for this life. Strong enough to make the impossible calls. Strong enough to risk everything when everything was on the line. Now she knew the answer. Kira opened the door and moved into the hallway with Atlas at her heel. Time to find out if a Marine sniper and her war dog could fight their way through an entire compound of enemy fighters. The alternative was not acceptable. Kira moved through the hallway with the AK-47 raised and Atlas tight against her left leg. Every corner was a potential ambush. Every shadow could hide a guard. She cleared the first room silently, then the second. Empty. The third room had 2 fighters sleeping on mats. She slipped past without waking them. The exit door was 15 feet away when the alarm went off. A harsh electronic wail that shattered the night silence. Kira cursed and broke into a run. Atlas matched her stride for stride as they burst into the courtyard. Gunfire erupted from the rooftop. Rounds sparked off the concrete near her feet. She returned fire without breaking stride. 3-round bursts toward the muzzle flashes. A guard went down. Another ducked behind cover. The technical truck was 30 meters away. Might as well have been 30 miles. Guards were pouring from the buildings now. At least 6 of them, weapons up and firing. Kira dropped to one knee behind a concrete barrier and laid down suppressing fire. Atlas crouched beside her, his body tense but disciplined. She burned through half her magazine in 10 seconds. The guards scattered, but they were organizing, flanking, getting into position. This was going to get very bad very quickly. A guard appeared on her left. Kira swung the rifle and fired. He dropped. Another came from the right. She pivoted and took him down with a controlled pair. But for every guard she dropped, 2 more appeared. The math was not working in her favor. Atlas growled low in his throat. Movement behind them. Kira spun and saw 3 fighters emerging from the building she had just left. She was surrounded. The technical truck's machine gun opened up, but it was not aimed at her. The heavy rounds tore into the guards on the rooftop, ripping through their positions with devastating effect. Kira looked at the truck in confusion and saw a figure behind the gun. American uniform. Marine digital camis. The Marine was laying down fire like a professional, short, controlled burst that kept the enemy pinned. Another Marine appeared from behind a truck, moving in a combat crouch toward her position. He was carrying an M4 and wore sergeant stripes. "Corporal Navarro," he shouted over the gunfire. "We are getting you out of here." Kira did not question it. She grabbed Atlas and ran for the truck. The sergeant provided covering fire, his shots precise and disciplined. They reached the vehicle, and Kira threw herself into the cab with Atlas. The sergeant jumped in beside her and keyed his radio. "Viper 6, this is Viper 2. We have a package. Requesting immediate extract." The Marine on the machine gun kept firing. Kira could see his face now in the muzzle flashes. Young, maybe 20, absolutely fearless. He was burning through ammunition like it was unlimited, keeping an entire compound of fighters suppressed. The sergeant looked at Kira. "Can you drive?" She nodded and slid behind the wheel. The keys were in the ignition. She turned them, and the engine roared to life. The sergeant climbed into the bed with the other Marine and pounded on the roof. "Go! Now!" Straight through the gate. Kira slammed the accelerator down, and the truck lurched forward. Guards scattered from her path. She aimed for the gate and prayed the vehicle would hold together. Atlas braced himself against the dashboard, his eyes fixed forward. The machine gun above her head opened up again, tracers arcing toward the gate guards. They dove for cover. Kira hit the gate, doing 40 miles an hour, and the metal barriers exploded outward. The truck bounced violently over debris, but kept moving. They were outside the compound, but they were not safe. Gunfire chased them down the street. Rounds punched through the truck's thin metal body. The rear window shattered. Kira kept her foot down and steered around abandoned vehicles and rubble. The sergeant was on the radio calling for support. Kira caught fragments through the chaos. Grid coordinates. Casualty report. Extract timeline. The machine gun fell silent, and she heard the sergeant cursing. The other Marine had been hit. She yanked the wheel hard left down a side street, and the truck went up on 2 wheels before slamming back down. Atlas slid across the seat, and Kira caught him with one hand while steering with the other. Behind them, the pursuit was organizing. Headlights. Engines. They were coming hard. 3 blocks. 4. Kira pushed the truck faster than it wanted to go. The engine was screaming, and smoke poured from under the hood. They were not going to make it far in this vehicle. The sergeant pounded on the roof again. 2 blocks ahead. Large building on the right. Rally point. Kira saw it. An old factory or warehouse, half collapsed from previous fighting. She aimed for the entrance and hit the brakes hard. The truck skidded sideways and slammed into a concrete pillar. The impact threw everyone forward. Kira's head hit the steering wheel, and stars exploded across her vision. Alice was barking. The sergeant was pulling her from the cab. She stumbled out with the AK-47 still in her hands and saw the other Marine being carried toward the building. He was conscious but bleeding heavily from his leg. Inside, the sergeant called. Now, they made it through the doorway as the first pursuit vehicle rounded the corner. Kira turned and fired, emptying her magazine toward the approaching headlights. The vehicle swerved, but kept coming. The sergeant was beside her now, his M4 barking in controlled bursts. "We cannot hold this position," he said. "Extract is 3 minutes out, but we need a roof for pickup." Kira looked around the warehouse. Stairs leading up. Metal catwalks. A roof access ladder. She pointed. There. The sergeant grabbed the wounded Marine and started climbing. Kira followed with Atlas, her hands shaking from adrenaline. Behind them, she could hear enemy fighters entering the building. Voices shouting. Boots on concrete. They reached the roof, and Kira scanned the skyline. In the distance, she could see aircraft lights. American helicopters inbound. But 3 minutes might as well be 3 hours with hostiles coming up the stairs. The sergeant positioned the wounded Marine behind a ventilation unit and took up a defensive position at the stairwell. Kira moved to the opposite side of the roof and checked her ammunition. 1 magazine left. 17 rounds. Atlas pressed against her leg, and she reached down to touch his head. "We're going home," she told him. "I promise." The first fighter came through the roof access, and the sergeant dropped him. Two more followed, and Kira took them both with quick, precise shots. Muscle memory from hundreds of hours on the range. Breath control. Trigger squeeze. Follow through. But they kept coming. 6, 8, 10. The sergeant was burning through magazines. Kira took her last shots, and the rifle clicked empty. She drew the sidearm she had taken from the guard and kept firing. The helicopter sound grew louder. Any second now. Just a few more seconds. A fighter made it onto the roof. The sergeant engaged him, but his rifle was empty. He drew his pistol, but the fighter was faster. The round caught the sergeant in the shoulder and spun him around. He went down hard. Kira turned and put 3 rounds into the fighter. He dropped. She moved to the sergeant and dragged him behind cover. He was bleeding but conscious. "Hold on," she said. "They're almost here." The helicopter appeared over the building like an avenging angel. A Black Hawk with door gunners already firing. The minigun tore into the rooftop access, shredding metal and concrete. Enemy fighters fell back. The Black Hawk flared and settled onto the roof. A crew chief jumped out and ran toward them. Kira grabbed Atlas and the wounded Marine. The sergeant pushed himself up and stumbled toward the helicopter. More Marines poured from the bird, providing covering fire. They made it aboard, and the Black Hawk lifted immediately. Rounds sparked off the armored belly, but nothing penetrated. Kira collapsed against the bulkhead with Atlas in her arms, her entire body shaking with exhaustion and relief. The crew chief was working on the wounded Marine, applying pressure to the leg wound. The sergeant sat against the opposite wall with a medic treating his shoulder. He looked at Kira and managed a tired smile. "Hell of a night, Corporal." Kira nodded, unable to speak. Through the open door, she could see the compound shrinking below them, could see the technical truck burning in the street, could see the warehouse roof where she had nearly died. Atlas licked her face, and she hugged him tighter. They had made it. Against impossible odds. Through skill and luck and the kind of stubborn refusal to quit that defined every Marine she had ever known. The sergeant leaned his head back and keyed his radio. "Viper 6, this is Viper 2. Package secure. All personnel accounted for. We're coming home." The Black Hawk touched down at Camp Aria 20 minutes later. Kira stepped on a solid American ground with Atlas beside her and felt her legs nearly give out. Adrenaline was wearing off, and the reality of the last 48 hours was crashing down like a collapsing building. Medics rushed forward with stretchers for the wounded Marines. The sergeant waved them off initially, but the medic was insistent. "You took a round through the shoulder, Sergeant Kovac. You're going to medical whether you like it or not." Kovac looked at Kira as they loaded him onto the stretcher. "Debrief is in 6 hours. Get some rest, Corporal. You earned it." Kira nodded and watched them carry him away. The other wounded Marine, the one who had been on the machine gun, gave her a weak thumbs up as they wheeled him past. She did not even know his name, did not know how they had found her or why they had risked their lives for a single captured Marine. A captain approached with a medical officer in tow. "Corporal Navarro, I am Captain Shun. We need to get you checked out and debriefed." The medical officer examined her quickly. Cuts and bruises. Dehydration. Possible concussion from the crash. Nothing that required immediate hospitalization, but enough that he wanted her in the medical tent for observation. "Atlas stays with me," Kira said flatly. Captain Shun nodded. "Understood. He saved your life out there. He has earned some privileges." They walked her to the medical tent and gave her a cot in the corner. A corpsman brought water and an MRE. Kira drank 3 bottles in quick succession and forced herself to eat, even though her stomach was in knots. Atlas lay beside the cot, his head on his paws, watching her with dark, intelligent eyes. The corpsman checked her vitals and cleaned her wounds. "You're lucky," he said. "Couple more days in that compound, and dehydration would have been a serious problem." Kira did not feel lucky. She felt hollowed out. Devin was dead. She had been captured. 2 Marines had been wounded extracting her. The mission had been a complete disaster. Captain Shun returned an hour later with a folder under his arm. He pulled up a chair and sat beside her cot. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got run over by a truck," Kira said honestly. The captain smiled slightly. "Fair assessment." He opened the folder and Kira saw surveillance photos. Aerial imagery. Intelligence reports. The captain tapped one of the photos showing the compound where she had been held. We have been tracking this cell for 3 months. High-value target. Commander named Rashid. He runs weapons and coordinates attacks across the entire province. When you went missing, we thought you were Kia. Then we intercepted radio chatter about a female Marine prisoner and a military working dog. Kira sat up straighter. How did you find the exact location? The captain pulled out another photo. This one showed her on the warehouse roof, firing at pursuing vehicles. You did. When you escaped and engaged hostiles, you lit up every sensor we had in the area. We triangulated your position and launched the extract team within minutes. So I saved myself, Kira said quietly. You saved yourself and gave us actionable intelligence on a target we have been hunting for months. Captain Shin leaned forward. What I'm about to tell you is classified. Rashid was not just running that compound. He was coordinating a major offensive. We found battle plans when we raided the compound after your extraction. They were planning to hit 3 American positions simultaneously. FOB Jackson, Checkpoint Delta, and the supply route through Haditha. Kira felt ice settle in her stomach. How many casualties? Estimates suggested 60 to 80 Kia if they had succeeded. Maybe 200 wounded. The captain closed the folder. Because you escaped when you did, and because we were able to raid that compound, we captured those plans. We have already repositioned forces and hardened defenses. The attack will fail if they're stupid enough to try it. The weight of those words settled over Kira like a physical thing. 60 to 80 lives. 200 families who would not get notification letters. All because she had refused to stay captured. There is something else, Captain Shin said. We recovered your gear from the compound, your rifle, your optics, and we found something interesting in their intelligence files. He pulled out a document covered in Arabic script with photos attached. Kira recognized some of the photos. Surveillance images of her in position. Long-range shots of her operating. They knew who you were, the captain said. They knew you were a sniper. They knew your kill count. Rashid had been tracking you specifically for weeks. The ambush that killed Lance Corporal Chun was not random. It was designed to capture you. Kira felt anger flood through her, hot and sharp. Devon died because they wanted me? Devon died doing his job, Captain Shin said firmly, protecting his Marine and completing the mission. Do not dishonor his sacrifice by turning it into something else. The words hit hard, but they were true. Kira closed her eyes and thought about Devon's last moments. He had been checking sight lines, doing exactly what a spotter was supposed to do. He had died as a Marine, in combat, serving his country. That mattered. The captain stood. Get some rest. Debrief is at 0600. After that, we will talk about what comes next. He left, and Kira lay back on the cot. Atlas jumped up beside her, which was technically against regulations, but the corpsman pretended not to notice. She wrapped her arms around the dog and felt his steady breathing against her chest. Her mind would not stop racing. Rashid had been hunting her specifically, had studied her patterns, had set an ambush designed to capture rather than kill. That meant he had seen value in taking her alive. Propaganda value, intelligence value, or something else. She thought about the interrogation, about the questions he had asked. He had been probing for information about sniper operations, about tactics and positioning, about how many snipers operated in the region. He had wanted to learn from her, to understand how American snipers thought and operated. And she had given him nothing, had lied and misdirected and protected her fellow Marines, even when it meant watching Atlas be dragged away. That decision had cost her, had put Atlas at risk, but it had been the right call, the only call. Sleep came eventually, though it was fractured and filled with dreams. Devon calling for help. Rashid's face in the interrogation room. The sound of Atlas barking from somewhere she could not reach. She woke 3 times in cold sweats before finally giving up on rest. At 0530, she got up and cleaned herself as best she could with the limited facilities available. A shower would have to wait. She found a clean uniform that almost fit and reported to the command tent at exactly 0600 with Atlas at her heel. Sergeant Kovac was already there, his arm in a sling, but otherwise looking alert. The young Marine from the machine gun was there too, his leg heavily bandaged, but a huge grin on his face when he saw her. "Corporal Navarro," he said. "I am Private First Class Marcus Webb. That was some driving last night." Kira shook his hand. "You saved my life on that gun. Just doing my job, ma'am." Though I got to admit, when Sergeant Kovac said we were going after a captured dog handler, I did not expect to find ourselves in the middle of World War III. Sergeant Kovac cleared his throat. "That is because I did not tell you the whole story, Webb. Corporal Navarro is not just a dog handler." Kira looked at Kovac sharply. The sergeant met her eyes, and she saw understanding there. Respect. Captain Chun entered with two other officers, a major and a lieutenant colonel. Everyone came to attention. The lieutenant colonel gestured for them to sit. "At ease. This is not a formal inquiry. This is a debrief and recognition." He looked at Kira. "Corporal Navarro, your actions over the past 48 hours prevented a catastrophic attack that would have cost American lives. Your escape and the subsequent raid on Rashid's compound gave us intelligence that has already changed our operational posture in this entire region." He opened a folder and pulled out a document. "Effective immediately, you are being recommended for the Bronze Star with valid advice. Additionally, your role in this operation has highlighted a critical capability gap that we intend to address." Kira blinked. "Sir?" The lieutenant colonel smiled. "Corporal Navarro, how would you feel about training other Marines to operate as integrated scout, sniper, and military working dog handler teams? Your unique skill set proved invaluable in the field. We want to replicate it." Kira looked at Atlas, then back at the colonel. She thought about Devin, about Sergeant Kovac and Private Webb who had risked everything to save her, about the 60 to 80 lives that would not be lost because she had refused to quit. "I would be honored, sir." The memorial service for Lance Corporal Devin Chun was held 3 days later on the base parade ground. Kira stood in formation with her unit, Atlas sitting perfectly still at her left side. The chaplain spoke about sacrifice and service, about a young Marine who had given everything for his brothers and sisters in arms. Devin's rifle stood inverted in the ground with his helmet balanced on top, his boots positioned at the base, his dog tags hanging from the rifle grip. The image would stay with Kira for the rest of her life. When the ceremony ended, Devin's squad leader approached her. Staff Sergeant Marcus Okafor was a 12-year veteran with 3 combat deployments and a chest full of ribbons. He had been the one who recommended Kira for Scout Sniper School when everyone else said she would wash out. "He died doing what he loved," Okafor said quietly. "Watching your 6, making sure you came home." Kira nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Okafor put a hand on her shoulder. "The Corps is sending his body home tomorrow. His fiancée will be at Dover to receive him." She asked if he would write her a letter, tell her about his last mission. "I will," Kira managed. Okafor squeezed her shoulder once and walked away. Kira stood there for a long time looking at Devin's memorial, Atlas pressed against her leg. She thought about all the conversations they had shared on long patrols, about how he used to complain about the heat and the sand and the MREs, but never once complained about the actual work. He had loved being a Marine, had loved serving alongside people who would die for each other without hesitation. She would write that letter, would tell Jennifer about how Devin had saved Kira's life twice before that final patrol, about how his last act was checking their sector for threats, about how he had been doing exactly what Marines do, protecting each other. The next morning, Kira reported to the training compound with Atlas. The facility was separate from the main base, designed for specialized instruction. Sergeant Kovac was waiting for her with Private Webb and 2 other Marines she had not met. Kovac's arm was out of the sling, but he moved it carefully. "Welcome to the pilot program," he said. "The brass decided to fast-track this thing. We have 4 weeks to develop a training curriculum for integrated sniper and MWD handler operations." Kira looked at the other 2 Marines. One was a staff sergeant with recon tabs and a weathered face that spoke of serious field time. The other was a female corporal with a Belgian Malinois sitting at perfect attention beside her. Staff Sergeant Luis Reyes, the veteran, said, extending his hand. "Scout Sniper School instructor." The colonel asked me to help develop the marksmanship component. Corporal Angela Vasquez, the woman said, MWD Hondliv. This is Odin. She gestured to her dog. The colonel thought having another female Marine in the program would be valuable. Kira shook both their hands and felt something ease in her chest. She was not alone in this. They were building something together, something that could save lives. The first week was brutal. They started every morning at 0500 with physical training, running with the dogs, obstacles, endurance drills. Atlas excelled, but Kira could see Odin struggling with some of the tactical movement requirements. He was trained for detection work, not combat operations. Vasquez noticed Kira watching. He is not used to the stress positions, she said during a water break. I have been working with him, but there is only so much you can train in a few days. Kira knelt beside Odin and studied him. The dog was older than Atlas by maybe 2 years. More experienced, but also more set in his patterns. She looked at Vasquez. How long have you worked together? 3 years, Vasquez said. Longest partnership in my company. We have cleared over 200 buildings together. Then he trusts you completely, Kira said. That is the foundation. Everything else is just teaching him new patterns. Show me his detection alert. Vasquez ran Odin through his paces, and Kira watched carefully. The dog was brilliant at his primary job. Fast, focused, méthodique. But he had been trained to alert and withdraw, not to alert and hold position. That would need a change for integrated operations where the handler might need to engage targets immediately after detection. They spent hours working on new command patterns, teaching the dogs to hold position silently after detection, to move in tactical formation with their handlers, to distinguish between friendly and hostile contacts through scent markers. It was slow, frustrating work that required endless repetition. The marksmanship training was equally demanding. Staff Sergeant Reyes pushed them through shooting drills that tested every skill Kira had learned in Scout Sniper School. But now she had to maintain proficiency while managing Atlas, while giving commands in German, while processing information from the dog about potential threats. Your dog becomes your forward sensor, Reyes explained during a range session. He detects what you cannot see, but you have to trust his alerts enough to act on them instantly. Hesitation gets people killed. They ran drills where the dog would alert to hidden targets, and the Marines had to engage within 3 seconds. Kira's scores were consistently high, but Vasquez struggled initially. She was used to calling an EOD after Odin alerted, not taking immediate action herself. You were thinking like a handler, Kira told her after one particularly rough drill. You need to think like a sniper who happens to have the best sensor package in the world attached to a leash. Vasquez looked at her. How do you switch between the two mindsets so fast? Kira thought about that. I do not switch. Atlas is part of my operational capability, just like my rifle or my optics. When he alerts, it is the same as if my scope picked up movement. The information goes straight into the tactical decision matrix. Private Webb watched these exchanges with obvious fascination. He had been assigned to the program as a designated marksman, his role to provide supporting fire for the integrated teams. His leg was healing well, and he attacked every drill with infectious enthusiasm. During a break on the 3rd day, Webb approached Kira. Corporal, can I ask you something? Shoot. How did you know you could trust Atlas when everything went sideways in that compound? You were surrounded, outgunned, probably should have just surrendered and hoped for rescue. But you fought your way out with him. What made you so certain he would not freeze up? Kira looked at Atlas, who was resting in the shade nearby. Because we have been through hell together before. He has never quit on me. Not once. Not when bombs were going off. Not when we were taking fire. Not when I asked him to do impossible things. That kind of trust is not something you think about in the moment. It just is. Webb nodded slowly. I want that. With my team. With the Marines I serve with. That certainty that we will not quit on each other no matter what. Then earn it, Kira said. Every single day. Show up. Do the work. Have their backs. Eventually they will realize you are someone they can count on when the world is burning down around them. The 2nd week brought live fire exercises in urban terrain. Mock villages with pop-up targets and simulated civilians. The teams had to clear buildings while the dogs detected threats and the shooters engaged. It was chaos and confusion and required absolute trust between every member of the team. Kira and Atlas moved through the exercise like they were connected by invisible wires. He alerted to a threat behind a wall. She engaged through the barrier based purely on his body language. He detected an ambush position. She eliminated it before the targets could engage. They were not just handler and dog anymore. They were a single-weapon system with 2 brains and 4 legs. Sergeant Kovac watched from the observation post with Staff Sergeant Reyes. "That right there," Kovac said. "That is what we are trying to replicate." Reyes shook his head in amazement. "I have been training snipers for 8 years, and I have never seen anyone process tactical information that fast." She trusts that dog more than most people trust their own eyes. "Because her eyes have been wrong before," Kovac said. But Atlas never has. By the end of week 2, the teams were functioning at a level that exceeded every expectation. Captain Chun came to observe a full mission rehearsal and watched as Kira and Vasquez led their teams through a simulated rescue operation. The dogs detected enemy positions. The Marines eliminated threats. The package was secured without a single simulated casualty. Chun pulled Kira aside after the exercise. "The lieutenant colonel wants to expand this program. Full integration across Scout Sniper and MWD communities. You are going to be the proof of concept." Kira felt the weight of that responsibility settle across her shoulders. "Sir, I am just a corporal." Chun smiled. "You are a Bronze Star recipient who prevented a massacre and pioneered a capability that is going to change how we fight. Rank is just a number on a collar. Corporal. What matters is what you can do and what you can teach others to do." That night, Kira sat in her quarters and wrote the letter to Jennifer. She told her about Devin's courage, about his skill, about how much he had meant to the Marines who served beside him. She told her that Devin had died protecting someone he believed in, that his last act was doing his job perfectly. She did not tell her about the nightmares, about waking up hearing Devin call for help, about the guilt that came with surviving when he had not. Some burdens were hers alone to carry. Atlas lay beside her cot, and Kira ran her fingers through his fur. They had survived. They had proven that her way of operating was not just possible, but valuable. And now they were going to teach others to do the same. Devin would have liked that, would have been proud that his sacrifice led to something that saved lives. That was enough. It had to be enough. The alert came during week 3 of training. 200 hours. Kira was deep in dreamless sleep when the alarm jolted her awake. Atlas was on his feet before she was, ears forward, body tense. She grabbed her gear and was dressed in 90 seconds. The command tent was full of officers when she arrived. Captain Chun waved her forward and pointed to a map on the display screen. "Intelligence indicates Rashid is moving tonight. He is planning to hit the supply convoy through Haditha despite knowing we hardened defenses. We think it's personal now. He wants revenge for the compound raid." Kira studied the map. The supply route ran through a valley with high ground on both sides. Classique embûche terrain. If Rashid positioned snipers and heavy weapons on the ridgelines, the convoy would be trapped in a kill zone. The lieutenant colonel entered, and everyone came to attention. At ease, he looked directly at Kira. "Corporal Navarro, I am activating your team for this operation. You and Corporal Vasquez will provide overwatch and early warning. Your dogs will detect ambush positions before the convoy enters the kill zone." Kira felt her pulse quicken. "Sir, we have only been training for 3 weeks. The team is not fully certified, which is why you will have full support. Sergeant Kovac and Private Webb will be your security element. Staff Sergeant Reyes will coordinate fires, but you're the primary sensor package. If anyone can find Rashid's positions before they spring the trap, it is you and Atlas." He paused, and his expression softened slightly. "I would not ask this if I did not believe you were ready. But American lives depend on early warning. Will you do it?" Kira looked at Atlas, then back at the colonel. "Yes, sir. We are ready." 30 minutes later, she was in a Humvee rolling toward the objective with Atlas beside her. Vasquez and Odin were in the vehicle behind them with Kovac and Webb. The convoy was scheduled to enter the valley at 0600, which gave them less than 4 hours to get into position and sweep for threats. The infiltration route took them through rough terrain that the vehicles could barely handle. Twice they had to dismount and move on foot to navigate obstacles. Atlas stayed close, his senses alert for any sign of danger. The night was cold and clear, stars overhead brilliant enough to navigate by. They reached the ridgeline at 0430, and Kira immediately began glassing the valley with her night vision. The supply route stretched below like a dark ribbon through the desert floor. Perfect embûche terrain. If she had been planning the attack, she would put snipers on the eastern ridge with clear sight lines, heavy weapons on the western ridge to hit vehicles, infantry in the rocks to finish survivors. She keyed her radio. Kovac, take Webb and secure 6. Vasquez, work the northern approach with Odin. I will sweep east with Atlas. Copy that, Kovac replied. We have your back. Kira moved along the ridgeline with Atlas ranging ahead. The dog was in full detection mode now, nose working the air currents, ears swiveling to catch sound she could not hear. They had gone maybe 200 meters when Atlas froze. His posture changed subtly. Ears forward, tail straight. Weight shifted forward on his front paws. Contact, Kira whispered into her radio. Atlas has something. Eastern ridge, approximately 300 meters from my position. She dropped prone and brought her rifle scope up. It took her 10 seconds to find what Atlas had detected. 2 men in a high position with a PKM machine gun. They were well concealed, but Atlas had smelled them from 3 football fields away. Kira marked their position and kept moving. Over the next hour, they found 6 more positions. Snipers, machine gun teams, a mortar position hidden in the rocks. Rashid had set up an elaborate ambush that would have devastated the convoy. But now Kira knew exactly where every element was positioned. Vasquez checked in. Odin alerted to personnel on the western ridge. At least 4 fighters. One has what looks like an RPG. Kira updated the tactical map on her tablet and transmitted it to the command post. Staff Sergeant Reyes came over the radio immediately. Outstanding work. I have coordinates for all positions. Cobra gunships are inbound. They will hit the positions 60 seconds before the convoy enters the valley. Kira acknowledged and settled into a hide position that gave her overwatch on the entire kill zone. Atlas lay beside her, calm and professional. She could see the convoy's headlights in the distance now, moving steadily toward the valley entrance. Her radio crackled. All elements stand by. Cobras are 30 seconds out. Kira watched the ridgelines through her scope. She could see movement now as Rashid's fighters prepared for the ambush that would never come. They had no idea they were about to become the targets. The Cobra gunships came in low and fast, their cannons opening up with devastating precision. The enemy positions erupted in explosions and tracers. The PKM team that Atlas had detected took a direct hit and disappeared in flame. The mortar position was shredded by 30mm rounds. In less than 45 seconds, the entire ambush force was destroyed. The convoy rolled through the valley without taking a single hit. Kira watched from her position and felt a grim satisfaction. Rashid had wanted revenge, had risked his fighters trying to hurt Americans. Instead, he had lost another dozen men and gained nothing. Movement caught her eye. A figure scrambling through rocks on the eastern ridge, trying to escape the carnage. Kira zoomed in with her scope and felt her breath catch. It was Rashid. She recognized him from the compound, from the interrogation room, from her nightmares. He was running hard, leaving his men behind, thinking only of his own survival. Kira tracked him with her scope. The range was extreme, maybe 800 meters. Wind was gusting from the west. Elevation change significant. It was a difficult shot under the best conditions, and these were far from ideal. But she had made harder shots, and Rashid deserved to face justice for Devon, for the ambush, for every American he had killed or wounded over the years. She settled her breathing and made the calculations automatically. Windage, drop, target movement. Her finger rested on the trigger, and she felt that familiar ice water calm settle over her. Atlas shifted beside her and looked directly at her face. It was an unusual behavior for him during an operation. She met his eyes and saw something there. Not judgment exactly, just awareness. He knew what she was about to do. Kira looked back through the scope. Rashid was still running, still escaping. She had him centered perfectly. One squeeze and he would drop. One shot and Devon would be avenged. Her finger tightened on the trigger, then stopped. She thought about what Captain Chen had said, about being proof of concept, about teaching others, about being more than just another sniper with a high kill count. She thought about Devon telling her once that the hardest shots were the ones you chose not to take. Kira keyed her radio. Command, I have eyes on Rashid. Eastern Ridge, bearing 085, range 800 meters. He is fleeing the engagement zone. Staff Sergeant Reyes responded immediately. Can you take the shot? Kira watched Rashid scramble over rocks, watched him run for his life. She could take the shot, could hit him right now. But alive, he was intelligence. Alive, he could be traded for captured Americans. Alive, he was more valuable than dead. Negative, she said quietly. Range is extreme, and I cannot guarantee clean hit. Recommand et interdiction. 90 seconds later, a Cobra rolled in and bracketed Rashid's position with cannon fire. The man went down and stayed down. Kira watched through her scope as Marines moved in to secure him. He was alive, but wounded. He would face justice in a courtroom instead of dying on a ridgeline. Atlas nudged her hand with his nose, and Kira scratched behind his ears. Good boy. We made the right call. The convoy completed its passage safely, and Kira's team extracted without incident. Back at base, the lieutenant colonel personally debriefed them. Your work tonight saved 30 American lives and captured a high-value target. This operation proves the concept works. Integrated Sniper and MWD teams are now officially part of our tactical doctrine. He looked at Kira. And Corporal Navarro, I am told you had Rashid in your sights. That you chose not to take a shot you could have made. That took discipline and judgment. Those qualities matter more than marksmanship. Kira nodded. He needed to face justice, sir. Not just revenge. The colonel smiled, spoken like a true professional. He turned to address the whole team. You proved tonight that this program works. That the capabilities you bring to the fight save American lives. I am expanding the training pipeline. Each of you will train the next generation of integrated teams. After the debrief, Kira walked back to her quarters with Atlas. The sun was rising over the desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. She thought about Devon, about how proud he would be that his death had led to something that saved lives, about how the best way to honor him was not through revenge, but through being better than the enemy. Sergeant Kovac caught up with her. Hell of a night, Corporal. Hell of a night, Kira agreed. For what it is worth, I think you made the right call on Rashid. Letting him die would have been easy. Making him face what he has done takes real courage. Kira looked at Atlas. I had a good example to follow. This dog has saved my life a dozen times and never once asked for anything in return. Just trust and partnership. Rashid could have learned something from that. Kovac laughed. Pretty sure Rashid is not capable of learning anything except hard lessons. But he will have plenty of time to think about it in a cell. They walked in comfortable silence for a while. Then Kovac said quietly, Devon will be proud of you, of what you built here, of who you have become. Kira felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them away. I hope so. I really hope so. She spent the rest of the day writing another letter. This one to the families of the 30 convoy personnel who had made it through that valley alive, because 2 dogs had smelled an ambush. She told them about Atlas and Odin, about Vasquez and Webb and Kovac, about how trust and training and partnership had saved their loved ones. She did not tell them about Rashid in her sights, about the choice she had made. Some things were meant to stay between her and Atlas and the desert sunrise that had witnessed it all. The Bronze Star ceremony was scheduled for the following week, but events moved faster than anyone anticipated. Intelligence extracted from Rashid revealed something that changed everything. He had not been working alone. His network extended far beyond a single province and included contacts within the Iraqi security forces. Captain Chun briefed Kira and her team in a secure room at 0700. Rashid is talking. Not because he wants to, but because we have leverage. He knows we captured his battle plans. Knows his network is compromised. He is trying to trade information for better treatment. What did he give up? Sergeant Kovac asked. Shin pulled up satellite imagery on the screen. A compound near the Syrian border. Rashid claims his second-in-command is there with a cache of weapons and intelligence materials. Documents. Hard drives. Names of embedded assets. If we can hit it before they sanitize the site, we could roll up the entire network. Kira studied the imagery. The compound was larger than the one where she had been held. Multiple buildings. Good sight lines. Professional security setup. This was not some ad hoc safe house. This was operational headquarters. Timeline? She asked. 12 hours. Maybe less. Rashid's people know he was captured. They're already moving to protect assets. We need to hit this target tonight. The lieutenant colonel entered, and everyone stood. At ease. He looked at the imagery and then at Kira. Corporal Navarro, I need your team for this operation. Fast insertion. Clear the compound. Secure the intelligence. Extract before reinforcements arrive. Sir, we just ran our first live mission last night, Kira said. We have not had time to reset or prepare for another op. I know what I'm asking, but your team has capabilities that no one else brings to this fight. Those dogs can detect threats that our technology cannot. And after last night, I trust you to make the hard calls when it matters. Kira looked at Atlas, who was sitting calmly beside her chair. The dog met her eyes with that unwavering trust that had carried them through everything. She thought about Devon, about the 30 lives saved last night, about the chance to dismantle the network that had killed her spotter and captured her. We are in, she said. What do you need us to do? The mission brief took 2 hours. Fast rope insertion from Blackhawks. For buildings to clear. Primary target was the northeastern structure where intelligence suggested the hard drives and documents were stored. Kira and Atlas would lead the assault on that building with Vasquez and Odin on the secondary structure. Kovac and Webb would provide security and cover the exfiltration. They spent the afternoon preparing gear and running through rehearsals. Atlas and Odin were given scent samples from items recovered from Rashid's original compound. The dogs needed to recognize the specific chemical signatures of explosives and weapons his network used. Private Webb approached Kira during a break. You think he's telling the truth, Rashid? Or is this a trap? Kira checked her rifle for the 3rd time. Could be both. Intel is often a mix of truth and misdirection. But we do not have the luxury of waiting to verify everything. Sometimes you have to take the shot and trust your training. Webb nodded and went back to checking his gear. Kira watched him work and saw the nervousness he was trying to hide. His first real combat insertion was tonight, and he was scared. Good. Scared meant alert. Scare meant careful. Overconfident got people killed. Corporal Vasquez joined her. How are you feeling about this? Kira considered the question. Honestly, part of me thinks this is too fast. We're not fully trained. We are pushing the limits of what these dogs can handle. But another part of me knows that waiting means letting that intelligence disappear. Means letting Rashid's network regroup. Vasquez smiled slightly. So we go in scared and professional. Exactly. The Blackhawks lifted off at 2000 hours under cover of darkness. Kira sat in the jump seat with Atlas between her legs, feeling the familiar vibration of the rotors through her body. The crew chief gave them a 10-minute warning, and everyone began final checks. Kira looked around the cabin at her team. Vasquez was calm and focused, one hand on Odin's vest. Kovac was reviewing the assault plan on his tablet. Webb was breathing carefully, managing his nerves. They were as ready as they were going to be. 5 minutes out, the crew chief opened the doors, and wind roared through the cabin. Below them, the desert was a dark expanse broken by occasional lights. The compound appeared as a square of illumination in the darkness. For buildings, walls, guard towers, exactly as the imagery had shown. The Black Hawk flared and Kira was on the rope before the crew chief finished signaling. She descended fast with Atlas in a harness on her chest. The dog had done this dozens of times in training, but never in combat. He stayed calm and professional as they hit the ground. Kira released Atlas and moved toward the northeastern building. Vasquez and Odin were already at the secondary structure. Kovac and Webb secured the landing zone. Everything was happening fast and smooth. Atlas alerted before they reached the door. His ears went forward and he shifted his weight. Kira hand-signaled to Kovac. Threat inside. Multiple contacts. Kovac nodded and moved into position. Kira placed a breaching charge on the door and everyone stacked up. 3, 2, 1. The charge detonated and the door blew inward. Kira was through immediately with Atlas beside her. The room was exactly as briefed. Desks with computers, filing cabinets, maps on walls, and 4 men scrambling for weapons. Kira engaged the closest threat with 2-round center mass. Kovac took the second. Webb got the third. The 4th man raised his hands and dropped to his knees. Atlas was already moving deeper into the building, checking rooms. Kira followed with her rifle up, clearing each space methodically. They found 2 more fighters in the second room. Both surrendered immediately when they saw American Marines with a military working dog. The intelligence was exactly where Rashid said it would be. Hard drives in a safe. Documents in filing cabinets. Maps showing positions across 3 provinces. Kira called in the intelligence specialists who began cataloging everything. Vasquez reported in. Secondary building secure. Odin detected explosive materials in the basement. Yodi is on site. Kira acknowledged and continued clearing rooms. That was when Atlas alerted again. This time his posture was different, more urgent. Kira recognized it immediately. Explosives. Close. Recent placement. She keyed her radio. Possible IED in primary building. Atlas has the scent. Everyone out now. The intelligence specialists grabbed what they could and evacuated. Kira worked with Atlas to locate the device. He led her to a back room where she found it taped under a desk. Professional work, designed to destroy the intelligence if anyone tried to retrieve it. The EOD tech arrived and studied the device. This is sophisticated, remote detonation capability. Someone is probably watching this compound right now with their finger on the trigger. How long to disarm? Kira asked. 10 minutes if I'm lucky. 20 if the circuit is complicated. Kira made the call. Everyone to the extract point. We're taking what we have and leaving. Not worth dying for hard drives we can reconstruct from other sources. The team moved toward the Blackhawks, but gunfire erupted from outside the walls. Reinforcements had arrived faster than expected. Tracers arced through the darkness, and rounds impacted the buildings around them. Kovac returned fire while Webb called in air support. Kira positioned herself to cover the intelligence specialists as they loaded gear onto the helicopters. Atlas stayed close, his body tense but controlled. A fighter appeared on the wall with an RPG. Kira saw him and took the shot without hesitation. He dropped, and the RPG tumbled harmlessly away. Another fighter tried to flank their position, and Atlas alerted. Kira spun and engaged before the man could fire. The Cobra gunships arrived and turned the battlefield into hell for the enemy reinforcements. The heavy cannons tore into their positions, and the return fire slackened. Kira grabbed Atlas and ran for the Black Hawk. They were airborne 30 seconds later with bullets still chasing them into the sky. The crew chief did a head count. Everyone accounted for. Minor injuries only. Mission successful. Kira sat back and let the adrenaline drain from her system. Atlas was panting heavily, but unhurt. Vasquez and Odin were across the cabin, both looking exhausted but satisfied. Kovac had a cut above his eye, but was grinning. Webb looked like he had aged 5 years in 2 hours, but he was alive. The compound disappeared behind them, flames rising from where the Cobras had hit enemy positions. Somewhere in that chaos was the network Rashid had built. Dismantled now. Broken by intelligence, he had given up, and Marines who had trusted their dogs to guide them through the darkness. Captain Chun was waiting when they landed. The intelligence he recovered is already yielding results. We have names, locations, financial networks. This is going to save American lives for months to come. He looked at Kira specifically. And that IED you found. Yodi confirmed it was on a dead man's switch. If you had stayed in that building another 3 minutes, someone would have detonated it remotely. Atlas saved your entire team. Kira knelt beside Atlas and wrapped her arms around him. The dog licked her face and wagged his tail like they had just come back from a routine training exercise. To him, it was simple. Kira needed him. He did his job. That was all that mattered. Staff Sergeant Reyes approached with the lieutenant colonel. Outstanding work tonight. Both missions. You have proven beyond any doubt that this program saves lives. The commandant wants a full briefing next week. This is going Corps-wide. The weight of those words settled over Kira. What had started as a desperate escape with her war dog was becoming doctrine that would protect Marines for years to come. Devin's death had led to something that mattered, something that would honor his sacrifice every time a dog alerted to danger and saved a team. She stood and faced the colonel. "Sir, request permission to name the program after Lance Corporal Devin Shun. He was my spotter, my friend. He died protecting me so I could do this work. I want his name attached to the capability that came from his sacrifice." The colonel considered this and nodded slowly. "The Chun Protocol. I like it. Consider it approved." That night, Kira wrote one final letter, this one to the Commandant of the Marine Corps. She detailed the capabilities integrated teams brought to the battlefield, the lives saved, the intelligence gathered, the trust between handler and dog that made impossible missions possible. She ended with a request. Train more teams. Give them the resources. Trust them to do the impossible. And remember that every team exists because one Marine named Devin Shun died doing his job perfectly. Atlas slept beside her cot as she wrote, his breathing steady and calm. They had been through hell together, had survived what should have killed them, had proven that trust and training and partnership could overcome any obstacle. Tomorrow they would start training the next generation, would teach other Marines and their dogs to operate the way she and Atlas had learned through fire and necessity, would build something that lasted beyond their service. But tonight, she just sat with her dog and felt grateful to be alive. The Bronze Star ceremony took place on the parade ground under a cloudless sky. Kira stood at attention in her dress blues, with Atlas sitting perfectly at her side. The entire base had turned out for the formation. Hundreds of Marines in perfect ranks, officers in their finest uniforms. Even the commanding general had flown in from Baghdad for the occasion. The citation was read aloud by the lieutenant colonel. For exceptionally meritorious achievement in connection with combat operations against the enemy. Corporal Kira Navarro demonstrated extraordinary courage and tactical proficiency while evading capture, gathering critical intelligence, and pioneering integrated military working dog and sniper operations that directly saved American lives. He pinned the Bronze Star with V device on her chest, and Kira felt the weight of it settle over her heart. The general shook her hand and spoke quietly, so only she could hear. "Your actions change how we fight, Corporal. The Chun Protocol is already being implemented across theater. You should be proud." "Thank you, sir," Kira managed. But it was not just me. It was Atlas. It was my team. It was Devin who died protecting me, so I could do this work. The general nodded. The best warriors always recognize those who made their success possible. That is what makes them great. After the ceremony, Kira was surrounded by well-wishers. Marines she had never met wanted to shake her hand. Officers asked about the training program. Other dog handlers wanted to know about Atlas and how she had developed such an effective partnership with him. Staff Sergeant Okafor fought through the crowd and pulled her into a bear hug. He had flown in from another base just for the ceremony. "I told you that you would be undeniable," he said with a huge grin. "I just did not know you would rewrite the entire tactical manual in the process." Kira laughed and felt tears prick her eyes. "You gave me the chance when no one else would. This medal belongs to you as much as me." Okafor shook his head. "This is all you, Navarro. You and that incredible dog. Speaking of which, where is his medal?" Kira looked down at Atlas, who was accepting attention from a group of junior Marines with patient dignity. "He does not care about medals. He just wants to work and be with his pack." "Best kind of Marine," Okafor said. That afternoon, Kira gave her first official briefing on the Chun Protocol to a room full of senior officers and intelligence analysts. She walked them through the tactical advantages of integrated teams, the sensory capabilities dogs brought to the fight, the trust-based decision-making that allowed handlers to act on canine alerts with confidence. A colonel from MARSOC raised his hand. How do you quantify the reliability of canine detection versus technical sensors? Kira pulled up data from their missions. In our operations, Atlas detected threats an average of 45 seconds before any technical system registered them. His false positive rate is under 2%. More importantly, he operates in conditions where electronics fail. Dust storms, electronic jamming, close quarters. The dog does not care about any of that. Another officer asked about scalability. How many teams can we realistically train and deploy? That depends on resources and commitment, Kira replied. Right now, we are training 4 new teams. With proper funding and instructor cadre, we could have 20 teams operational within 6 months, 40 within a year. The briefing lasted 3 hours, and by the end, every officer in the room was convinced. The Chen Protocol received full funding approval and authorization to expand immediately. Kira walked out of that room, knowing she had just changed the future of Marine Corps operations. Sergeant Kovac was waiting outside. You just sold the entire Corps on this program. How does it feel? Terrifying, Kira admitted. What if we cannot deliver? What if the next teams do not perform like we did? Kovac smiled. Then you train them until they do. You have Vasquez. You have Reyes. You have me and Webb. We build this together, and we build it right. That evening, Kira received a video call from Jennifer, Devin's fiancée. She had never met the woman face-to-face, but they had exchanged letters after Devin's death. Jennifer's eyes were red, but she was smiling. I wanted to thank you, she said, for the letters, for telling me how Devin died, and for what you were doing with the Chen Protocol. His parents told me about how his name will be attached to something that saves lives. Kira felt her throat tighten. He deserved to be remembered. He was the best spotter I ever worked with and one of the finest Marines I ever knew. Jennifer wiped her eyes. He talked about you constantly in his letters home, about how you were going to change things, how you were proof that skill mattered more than what other people thought. He believed in you, Kira, and he was right. They talked for another 20 minutes about Devin, about the memorial service, about the future. When the call ended, Kira sat in the darkness of her quarters with Atlas beside her and let herself cry. For Devin, for everything he had lost, for the life he would never get to live, but also for what his sacrifice had created, for the teams that would deploy with the Chen Protocol, for the Marines who would come home alive because a dog smelled danger before it struck, for the legacy that would outlive them all. The next morning brought news that changed everything again. Rashid had been transferred to a detention facility, and during processing, he asked to speak with Kira specifically. The request went up the chain and came back approved with conditions. She would have guards present. The conversation would be recorded, and she could refuse at any time. Kira thought about it for exactly 10 seconds before agreeing. She needed to look him in the eye one more time, needed to see the man who had killed Devin and tried to break her reduced to a prisoner facing justice. The detention facility was a 40-minute drive from base. Kira went alone except for Atlas, who had been specifically requested to accompany her. The guards led her to a small interview room where Rashid sat shackled to a table. He looked smaller than she remembered, diminished. His eyes went to Atlas first, and something like fear flickered across his face. Then he looked at Kira and attempted a smile. Corporal Navarro, I heard about your medal. Congratulations. Kira said nothing, just stared at him with the same cold assessment she used to range targets. Rashid shifted uncomfortably. I asked to see you because I wanted to tell you something. About your friend, the one we killed in the ambush. His name was Lance Corporal Devin Chen, Kira said quietly. And if you were about to tell me something designed to hurt me, save your breath. No, Rashid said quickly. Not that. I wanted you to know that his death was quick. He did not suffer. My men reported that he was scanning for threats when the first shots hit. He was doing his job. He died as a warrior. Kira felt something crack in her chest. Why are you telling me this? Because I have spent 3 weeks in American custody watching how you people operate. watching the respect you show even to enemies, watching the discipline and the honor. And I realized something. We were fighting warriors who had principles we could never match. Your friend died protecting you. You had me in your sights and chose not to kill me. That kind of discipline and mercy does not exist in my world. He leaned forward as far as the chains would allow. I gave you the intelligence because I wanted to hurt the people who built this network as much as you did. They used me, lied to me, sent fighters to die while they grew rich. But you Americans actually believe in something beyond profit and revenge. Your friend believed it. You believe it. Even the dog believes it. Kira looked at Atlas, who was watching Rashid with calm alertness. What do you want from me? Nothing, Rashid said. I'm going to prison for a very long time. I know this. I accept this. I just wanted you to know that your friend's death meant something. That the network he died fighting is broken now. And that I will spend my time in prison thinking about the Marine who could have killed me and chose justice instead. Kira stood to leave. Then she paused. Devin would have wanted me to tell you that you made a choice today. To help instead of hurt. To break the cycle instead of continuing it. That matters too. She walked out with Atlas at her side and did not look back. Outside the facility, she sat in the Humvee for a long moment, just breathing. The guard driver looked at her with concern. You okay, Corporal? Kira nodded slowly. Yeah, I think I am. That night, she wrote one more entry in the journal she had been keeping since the ambush. She wrote about Rashid, about mercy and justice, about how Devin had died believing in something bigger than revenge, about how that belief had shaped everything that followed. She ended with a single line. Devin Chun died a warrior and created warriors in his wake. That is the only legacy that matters. Atlas slept beside her as she wrote, his breathing steady and peaceful. Tomorrow they would begin training the next class of integrated teams, would pass on everything they had learned through pain and survival, would build something that honored everyone who had sacrificed. But tonight, she just sat with her dog and her memories and felt grateful for the chance to turn tragedy into purpose. That was what Marines did. They took the worst moments and forged them into something stronger. The Chun Protocol would save lives. Devin's name would be spoken with respect by Marines who never met him. And Atlas would continue to do what he did best. Protect his Marine and prove that trust between species could overcome any obstacle. Kira looked at her Bronze Star sitting on the desk and thought about what the general had said. The best warriors recognized those who made their success possible. She had recognized Devin, had recognized Atlas, had recognized every Marine who had supported her journey from doubted corporal to program founder. Now is time to pay that forward. Time to create the next generation of warriors who would carry the legacy into the future. Time to ensure that no Marine ever died because someone failed to trust their dog's nose over their own eyes. The work was just beginning. But Kira Navarro had never been afraid of hard work. And she had the best partner in the world sleeping beside her, ready to face whatever came next. The first class of Chun Protocol trainees arrived 6 weeks later. 12 Marines and 12 military working dogs from across the Corps. Some were experienced snipers learning to work with dogs. Others were veteran handlers learning to shoot at extreme range. All of them were volunteers who understood they were building something that had never existed before. Kira stood in front of them on the first day of training with Atlas at her side. She looked at their faces and saw the same mix of determination and uncertainty she had felt 3 years ago when she arrived at Scout Sniper School. The same hunger to prove themselves. The same willingness to do whatever it took. Welcome to the Chun Protocol, she began. You are here because you volunteered for one of the hardest assignments in the Marine Corps. You're going to learn to think like a sniper and operate like a dog handler simultaneously. You're going to develop trust with an animal that goes deeper than anything you have experienced. And you're going to save American lives by combining capabilities that separately are good, but together are exceptional. She paused and gestured to Corporal Vasquez and Staff Sergeant Reyes, who stood beside her. We're your instructor cadre. We have done this work in combat. We have made the mistakes you will make. We have survived by learning that every decision matters and every second of hesitation can cost lives. We're going to push you harder than you have ever been pushed. Some of you will quit. That is okay. Better to quit in training than to fail in combat. A lance corporal in the front row raised his hand. Corporal Navarro, is it true you were captured and escaped with just your dog? Kira nodded. Atlas and I were taken prisoner after an ambush that killed my spotter. We escaped through a combination of training, luck, and absolute refusal to quit. That experience taught me that the bond between handler and dog is not just professional. It is survival. Your dog will save your life if you trust him, and you will save his if you are worthy of that trust. Over the next 12 weeks, Kira and her team transformed those 12 Marines into integrated operators. They ran them through punishing physical training designed to build endurance for operations where both handler and dog had to perform at peak for extended periods. They taught advanced marksmanship while managing a dog on leash. They drilled explosive detection while maintaining tactical awareness. The failures came quickly. 2 Marines washed out in the first week when their dogs would not bond with them. Trust could not be forced, and the dogs knew immediately when a handler was not committed. Another Marine quit after a training accident where his dog was injured. He blamed himself and could not move past the guilt, but the others persevered. Kira watched them grow from uncertain beginners into confident teams. She saw the moment when each Marine stopped thinking of the dog as a tool and started thinking of them as a partner. That shift in mindset was everything. Private First Class Sarah Nakamura was one of the standouts. She had come from the K-9 community with 3 years of experience handling detection dogs, but had never fired a rifle beyond basic qualifications. Kira worked with her personally, teaching her the fundamentals of long-range shooting. You are thinking too much, Kira told her after a frustrating morning on the range. Your body knows what to do. Your dog knows what to do. You just have to get your brain out of the way and let it happen. Nakamura tried again, and this time the shot was perfect. 800 meters. Dead center. She looked at Kira with shock and delight. I did it. You did it, Kira confirmed. Now do it 47 more times, and you will be where I started. By week 8, the teams were running live fire exercises that simulated combat conditions. Kira watched from the observation post as Nakamura and her dog, a German shepherd named Titan, cleared a building under fire. The dog detected an IED. Nakamura marked it and engaged hostile targets while directing her team around the threat. It was textbook execution of the Chun protocol. She's going to be better than you were, Sergeant Kovac said from beside Kira. Good, Kira replied. That is the whole point. Each generation should be better than the last. The graduation ceremony was held on a Friday with the same formality as any other Marine Corps school. The commanding general presented each team with their Chun protocol certification. Kira stood with the other instructors and felt pride swell in her chest as she watched them receive their credentials. After the ceremony, Staff Sergeant Okafor approached with someone Kira had not expected to see. A woman in civilian clothes with Devin's eyes and his smile. His mother. Mrs. Chun, Kira said, her voice catching. I did not know you were coming. The woman pulled her into a hug. Jennifer told me about the program, about what you built in my son's name. I had to see it for myself. They walked together to the training facility, and Kira showed her everything. The range where teams qualified. The detection course where dogs learned to identify threats. The tactical facility where handlers and dogs learned to move as one unit. Mrs. Chun stopped in front of a plaque that had been mounted on the wall. In memory of Lance Corporal Devin Chun. His sacrifice created warriors. His legacy saves lives. She touched the plaque gently, and tears ran down her face. He would have been so proud of this, she whispered. So proud of you. He made it possible, Kira said. He protected me so I could do this work. Every team that graduates carries a piece of him forward. They sat together in the observation room, and Kira told her stories about Devin, about his humor and his skill and his absolute dedication to his Marines, about how he died doing exactly what he had trained to do. Mrs. Chun listened and laughed and cried, and by the end she was smiling. Thank you, she said, for giving his death meaning, for making sure he is remembered. After she left, Kira sat alone in the facility with Atlas. The sun was setting and golden light streamed through the windows. She thought about the journey from that ambush to this moment, about capture and escape, about terror and triumph, about loss and purpose. Sergeant Kovac found her there an hour later. The teams want to buy you a drink at the club. You coming? Kira stood and stretched. Yeah, let me grab my cover. They walked across the base together with Atlas between them. The evening was cool and clear, the kind of night that made deployment almost bearable. In the distance, Kira could hear Marines calling cadence during a run. The eternal rhythm of military life continuing regardless of individual stories. You know, the commandant is talking about making you a sergeant, Kovac said casually. Milito you promotion. You have earned it 10 times over. Kira shook her head. I do not need rank. I need to train teams. Need to make sure the Chan Protocol becomes so embedded in Marine Corps culture that it outlives all of us. Kovac smiled. You're going to do both whether you want to or not. That is what happens when you become exceptional. Responsibility finds you. At the club, the newly graduated teams had pushed tables together and were celebrating with the controlled enthusiasm of Marines who knew they had earned their achievement. Nakamura waved Kira over and thrust a drink in her hand. To Corporal Navarro and Atlas, she said, raising her glass, for showing us what is possible when you trust your partner absolutely. The teams echoed the toast, and Kira felt emotion well up in her throat. She looked at these 12 teams who would deploy in the coming months, who would use what she had taught them to save lives and complete missions, who carried Devon's legacy forward whether they knew him or not. Atlas sat at her feet, and Kira reached down to scratch his ears. This dog had saved her life a dozen times, had trusted her through capture and escape in combat, had helped her transform tragedy into purpose. She owed him everything. Later that night, back in her quarters, Kira updated her journal. She wrote about the graduation, about Mrs. Chen's visit, about the teams who would carry the Chan Protocol into combat. She wrote about how grief could be transformed into purpose if you refused to let it destroy you. She ended with a thought about the future. Somewhere out there, a Marine was going to be in an impossible situation, surrounded, outgunned, moments from death, and their dog was going to alert to a threat they could not see. And that Marine was going to trust the dog, absolutely. And both of them were going to survive because Kira Navarro had refused to quit in a compound where she was captured, because Devon Chun had died protecting his spotter, because 12 teams had learned that trust between species could overcome any obstacle. That was legacy, not medals or ceremonies or recognition. Legacy was the lives saved by people you would never meet. Legacy was the future you built from the wreckage of the past. Kira looked at Atlas sleeping peacefully beside her cot. Tomorrow they would start training the next class. Would do it all again. Would continue building something that mattered. But tonight she just sat with her dog and felt grateful. Grateful for survival. Grateful for purpose. Grateful for the chance to honor Devon by ensuring his death saved hundreds of lives instead of just ending one. The Bronze Star sat on her desk, catching moonlight from the window. The medal was nice. The recognition mattered. But the real reward was knowing that somewhere in the future, a dog would save a Marine because Kira had taught someone to trust what their dog was telling them. That was enough. That was everything. Atlas shifted in his sleep, and his paw twitched, probably dreaming about missions and detection work, about doing the job he loved with the Marine he trusted. Kira smiled and closed her journal. The Chin Protocol was real now, embedded in doctrine, funded and supported, growing with every graduating class. Devon's name would be spoken by Marines for decades. His sacrifice would save lives long after everyone who knew him had retired or died. And Kira Navarro, the corporal who had been captured and escaped and refused to let tragedy define her, would continue training teams until she could not train anymore, would continue building the legacy that honored everyone who had made it possible. The work was far from over, but for tonight, she could rest knowing they had built something that mattered, something that would last, something worthy of the sacrifice that had made it possible. 6 months after the first graduation, word came back from the field. A Chun Protocol team in Helmand Province had detected an ambush that would have killed 8 Marines. Another team in Fallujah had located a weapons cache that intelligence had been hunting for 2 years. A third team had provided overwatch for a hostage rescue that brought home 2 American contractors alive. The reports kept coming. Every week brought new confirmation that the program was working exactly as designed. Lives were being saved. Missions were succeeding. The integration of sniper capability and military working dog detection was proving as effective in the field as it had been in training. Kira compiled these reports into briefings for the commandant and for the instructors who were expanding the program across multiple bases. The Chun Protocol was no longer experimental. It was proven doctrine with a growing operational record. She was in her office reviewing the latest field reports when Sergeant Kovac knocked on the doorframe. "Got a minute?" "Always," Kira said, gesturing to a chair. Atlas lifted his head from where he was sleeping under her desk, recognized Kovac, and went back to sleep. Kovac sat down and pulled out an envelope. "This came through official channels this morning. Orders for you." Kira took the envelope and opened it. Her eyes scanned the text and widened. "They're sending me stateside, to Quantico, to establish a permanent Chun Protocol training center." Kovac grinned. "You're getting promoted to sergeant and being assigned as the chief instructor for the entire program. Congratulations." Kira sat back and tried to process it. Leaving the combat zone, leaving the base where everything had happened, where Devon had died, where she had been captured, where she had built something from nothing. "This is a good thing," Kovac said, reading her expression. "You have proven the concept here. Now you get to scale it. Train the trainers. Build the infrastructure. Make it permanent." "And Atlas?" she asked. "Atlas goes with you. The orders specifically state that you and your military working dog will establish the training protocols together. He is part of this just like you are." That night, Kira walked the perimeter of the base with Atlas. She visited the memorial where Devon's name was engraved along with other Marines who had fallen during the deployment. She stood there for a long time, thinking about the scared corporal who had lost her spotter in an ambush and the sergeant who was about to go home to train the next generation. "Thank you," she said quietly to the memorial, "for everything, for protecting me, for believing in me, for making this possible." The wind carried dust across the parade ground, and somewhere a Marine was calling cadence. The eternal rhythm of the Corps. Always training, always preparing, always moving forward. She reported to Captain Chun the next morning to finalize the transition. He shook her hand with genuine warmth. "You changed this war, Sergeant Navarro. Not through one heroic action, but through hundreds of small decisions to do things right. To trust your dog, to honor your friend, to build something that lasts." "I had good examples to follow," Kira replied. "Now you get to be the example for others. That is how this works. Someone believed in you. You believe in them. The chain continues." The final week passed in a blur of transition meetings and farewell ceremonies. The second class of Chun Protocol students was graduating, and Kira wanted to be there. She stood with Corporal Vasquez and Staff Sergeant Reyes as they presented certifications to another 12 teams ready for deployment. Private Nakamura had been retained as an instructor and was already working with a third class. Kira watched her teach and saw herself from 6 months ago. The same intensity, the same commitment to getting it right. The program was in good hands. On her last night in country, the entire training cadre threw her a send-off at the club. Marines from across the base came to wish her well. People she had never met thanked her for starting the program. Dog handlers told her about how the Chun Protocol had changed their training. Snipers talked about how they were learning to trust capabilities beyond their rifles. Sergeant Kovac stood and raised his glass. "To Sergeant Kira Navarro and Atlas, for showing us that trust beats technology, that partnerships beat procedures, and that one Marine with absolute faith in her dog can change how an entire corps fights." The room erupted in cheers, and Kira felt tears threaten but held them back. She stood and looked at all these faces. Her team, her students, her fellow Marines who had supported her through everything. "I did not do this alone," she said. "Devon Chun gave his life protecting me. Atlas saved me a dozen times. Sergeant Kovac and his team extracted me when I was captured. Every person in this room contributed to making the Chun Protocol real. This is not my achievement. It is ours. She paused and looked down at Atlas. And mostly it belongs to these incredible animals who trust us enough to walk into danger at our side, who alert to threats we cannot see, who never quit on us even when we fail them. They are the real heroes of this program. The flight home left at dawn. Kira loaded Atlas into his travel crate and settled into her seat for the long journey back to the United States. As the aircraft climbed away from Iraq, she looked down at the desert that had nearly killed her and had instead transformed her into someone who mattered. Quantico was green and humid compared to the desert. Kira reported to the training center that would become the permanent home of the Chun Protocol program. The facility was still under construction, but the bones were good. Ranges, Ditik tactical training areas, everything needed to train teams at scale. The first day, she walked the facility with Atlas and began planning. Where to put the kennels, how to structure the curriculum, which equipment to procure. She worked with architects and trainers and logisticians to build something that would last decades. 3 months later, the facility opened officially. The commandant himself cut the ribbon and gave a speech about innovation and courage and the Marine who had turned personal tragedy into institutional capability. Kira stood with Atlas and felt the weight of responsibility and pride in equal measure. Mrs. Chun was in the audience with Jennifer. After the ceremony, they toured the facility together, and Kira showed them the memorial wall where Devin's name was prominently displayed. Beneath, it was the mission statement of the Chun Protocol. Trust your partner. Honor the fallen. Save the living. This is beautiful, Mrs. Chun said, touching Devin's name on the wall. He would have loved knowing his name was attached to something this important. Kira nodded. Every team that graduates will see his name. Will understand that this program exists because a Marine named Devin Chin died, doing his job perfectly. That matters. That endures. The first class at the new facility graduated 6 months later. Then another, and another. The program grew from 12 teams to 40 to 80. Chun Protocol teams deployed to every combat zone. The reports of lives saved and missions accomplished piled up until they required their own archive. 5 years after her promotion, Kira stood in front of the 300th graduating class. Atlas was older now, his muzzle showing gray, but he still attended every graduation. The students loved seeing the original team, the dog who had helped build everything they were learning. You're carrying forward a legacy, Kira told them. A legacy built on sacrifice and trust. Lance Corporal Devin Chun died, so this program could exist. Hundreds of military working dogs have served alongside their Marines in combat. Thousands of lives have been saved because someone trusted their dog absolutely. You are part of that chain now. Make it count. After the ceremony, Kira walked Atlas through the facility one more time. He was slowing down, arthritis in his hips, hearing not as sharp as it once was. He had been retired from active training 2 years ago, but she brought him to every graduation. The students needed to see him, needed to understand what a lifetime of service looked like. That night, in her quarters, Kira sat with Atlas and went through the scrapbook she had been keeping. Photos of every graduating class, letters from teams in the field, awards and commendations, but mostly stories. Stories of Marines who had survived because their dog alerted to danger. Stories of missions accomplished because handlers trusted their partners. She turned to a page with a photo of Devin in his uniform, young and smiling and full of life. Next to it was the citation for a Bronze Star, and beside that, a photo of her and Atlas on the day they graduated from the first Chun Protocol class together. The journey from that ambush to this moment had been long and hard, but it had been worth every step, worth the nightmares, worth the grief, worth the doubt and fear and struggle, because it had produced something that saved lives and would continue saving lives long after she was gone. Atlas shifted and put his head on her lap. Kira scratched behind his ears in the way he had always loved. Good boy, she whispered. Best partner I could have asked for. If you enjoyed this story, please drop a comment and let us know your favorite part or character, or if you have had a similar situation where trust in a partner saved the day. Outside the window, she could see the next class of students running drills with their dogs, learning the same lessons she had learned, building the same bonds, preparing to carry the legacy forward into whatever conflicts waited in the future. The Chin Protocol would outlive her, would outlive Atlas, would outlive everyone who had built it from blood and determination and absolute refusal to let tragedy win. That was what mattered. That was what endured. Kira Navarro had been captured on a battlefield with her war dog. The enemy had not known she was a sniper, had not known what she was capable of, had not known that capturing her would lead to their entire network being dismantled and a new doctrine being born that would change how Marines fought. She had been underestimated, had been written off, had been assumed to be just a dog handler caught in the wrong place. Instead, she had become the Marine who proved that trust beats technology and that partnerships forged in fire become unbreakable. The legacy would continue. The teams would deploy. The lives would be saved. And somewhere in a future she would never see, a Marine and their dog would survive an impossible situation because Kira Navarro had refused to quit in a compound where she was supposed to die. That was enough. That was everything. That was what it meant to be a Marine.